Your Excellency, Prime Minister, Excellencies, invited guests, good morning. So the presentations before mine discussed two essential foundations of Ethiopia's transformation: macroeconomic reform and productive urbanization. What I will focus on is on how digital systems are helping connect and accelerate that transformation. Around the world, the rise of companies like NVIDIA, OpenAI, DeepSeek, Google show that technology has become a defining force in the global economy. For Ethiopia, the question is not only whether we produce the next global technology company, it is also how digital systems help organize the economy. Digital transformation is changing how markets function, how institutions interact, and how citizens and firms access services. Ethiopia is moving from fragmented systems toward a more integrated economic model, and digital is at the center of that transition. This brings me to the core of my presentation. Digital should be understood not only as a sector, but as part of the architecture of an economic transformation. Modern economies grow through connected systems. Structural reforms create market and competition. Digital systems connect those markets to institutions, services, and transactions, and capability determines whether that connection becomes productivity. So the question is not whether digital is useful, it is whether digital is connected to the wider economic transformation. When reforms, digital systems, capability reinforce one another, transformation accelerates. How exactly do digital systems change economic activity? We see four major mechanisms. First, they reduce information asymmetry. They improve visibility, trust, and access to information. Second, they expand market participation, lowering barriers for individuals and firms to enter markets. Third, they accelerate transactions and service delivery, making interaction faster and more predictable. Fourth, they improve interoperability across institutions and markets, enabling more connected economic activities. For example, digital payments reduce transaction time from hours, it used to be days actually, to seconds today. Another example is FIDA. It reduces the costs and the time required to onboard individuals and businesses in the formal economy. Digital infrastructure increasingly supports identity, payments, information flows, institution interaction, and market participation. In other words, digital no longer is functioning only as a support tool. It is increasingly becoming part of the infrastructure through which modern economies operate. So let me take a bit of a historical journey and look at how Ethiopia's economic systems have evolved over time. From centralized systems to infrastructure expansion to economic integration today. Each phase addressed a different national challenge. But the key shift here is that these systems are beginning to connect. During the Derg, technology existed. It primarily served centralized state systems rather than markets. We saw mechanized farms, irrigation systems, centralized planning systems, and early industrial infrastructure. These systems were not designed to expand participation or competitive economic activity. The lesson here is that technology alone, without productive and competitive markets, does not sustain broad-based growth. And that lesson remains true today. Under EPRDF, Ethiopia made a leap in infrastructure. Not only in infrastructure, but particularly in telecom, in aviation, in energy, in roads and industrial parks. However, many systems expanded unevenly, and they operated independently rather than as part of an integrated economic infrastructure. Infrastructure advances faster than institutional coordination. Vendor-financed expansion increased external debt exposure, and skills were misaligned with market needs, which limited job creation. So the infrastructure foundation was built, but it was not connected to a productive strategy. The gap is reflected in the shortfall of our exports, for example. The lesson here is that building infrastructure is not the same as integrating an economy. Before I move to today's digital model, I want to pause on energy. As we heard earlier from my colleague's presentation, productive transformation depends on the infrastructure beneath it. Energy is one of those foundations. Digital systems cannot scale without power. Reliable energy is critical to a modern economy. Historically, limited electricity access constrained industrialization, digitalization, and productive activity. Infrastructure expansion often moved faster than reliable energy availability. That is now changing. Ethiopia has made a major structural shift, and that through diversified, large-scale investment in renewable energy generation and transmission infrastructure. Today, we have 98% of our electricity mix that is renewable. That's one of the highest shares globally and across Africa. Installed generation capacity now exceeds 6 gigawatts. Electricity access has reached 63% of the population. And the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the largest hydroelectric project in Africa, is becoming the foundation for industrial-scale energy expansion. So energy is no longer only a utility story. It is becoming strategic economic infrastructure that supports productive sectors. And in the era of AI, that matters even more, because energy increasingly powers data centers, compute infrastructure, advanced manufacturing, and future industrial capacity itself. What is interesting is what happens after the energy foundation scales. The impact is no longer limited to electricity access alone. It starts enabling entirely new industrial ecosystems. Ethiopia is now beginning to attract investment in solar manufacturing, assembly ecosystems, renewable energy supply chains, and broader green industrial activity. This shift is important. The move is from simply consuming clean energy technologies to participating in their production and integration into regional and global value chains. An emerging solar manufacturing is taking shape, with factories producing solar cells reaching up to 20 gigawatts of manufacturing capacity. And this represents the next phase of transformation: energy infrastructure enabling industrial capability supporting economic diversification, and green growth becoming part of long-term national competitiveness. So when energy infrastructure is scaling, here is how the digital layer now is being built on top of it. Today, Ethiopia's digital model is fundamentally different from the previous eras. We have moved away from debt finance expansion of the past toward an investment-led, market-oriented approach. This is supported by stronger revenues, improved profitability, and a gradual shift toward market-based financing, including IPO participation. The entry of Safaricom brought significant foreign investment and competition. Critics predicted it would undercut states' revenue. In fact, the opposite happened. Telecom users more than doubled from 37.9 million to 85+ million today. Mobile broadband users reached 61 million. Ethio Telecom revenue grew from 37 billion in 2019 to 162 billion in 2025. Market opening brought more than 8.5 billion in new private investment commitment. Ethiopia is now one of the fastest growing digital markets on the continent. This is the classic result of a well-sequenced liberalization. Technology is increasingly becoming part of how the economy coordinates activity. So digital systems functions in three ways: as infrastructure, as coordination, and as intelligence. Fundamentally, what is changing is how the economy itself is organized. At the core of this transformation is digital public infrastructure, or DPI. It is governed under our national strategy, Digital Ethiopia 2030. Digital Ethiopia 2025 established the initial foundations: electricity, connectivity, digital services, institutional reforms, and adoption. We're now moving toward integrated economic systems. DPI is built around three foundational systems: digital identity, FIDA, today has enrolled over 45 million people. It is the trust layer and access, reducing onboarding costs across the economy. Payments are the transaction layer. They increase liquidity, speed, and financial inclusion. Mobile money was previously criminalized under banking regulations. Today, we have 257 million mobile money and mobile banking accounts, with transaction values exceeding 24 trillion birr in the last 9 months. And the data exchange layer, we're now rolling this out to enable secure, real-time data sharing across institutions, reducing information asymmetry and improving service delivery. So we're not talking about IT systems here or government IT systems here. These are economic systems that increasingly support transactions, onboarding, trust, and interoperability across the economy. And most importantly, these are the rails on top of which the private sector can build products and services. So this is where integration becomes visible. Through MASOB and the emerging data exchange layer, institutions that previously operated in silos are beginning to function as connected systems. As you will see today, while you visit the MASOB exhibition, 217 agencies are now integrated nationally. Data moves across more than 1,600 services. This is being delivered in 70 locations, ranging from modern centers to 3 mobile buses running on green energy, and now a unified app. Interactions are simpler and more predictable. This makes government services faster, simpler, and more predictable. So now we're seeing measurable effects across sectors. Earlier we heard how cities, for example, are being positioned as engines of growth. Digital systems help connect those transformations, improving coordination, transactions, market access, and information flows. In agriculture, better coordination is supporting productivity, clustering, and market integration. Wheat output, as we heard from Dr. Myriam, reached 33 million tons. 9.5 million farmers are in production clusters, and cluster productivity gains are around 29%. In finance, lower financial access barriers are improving liquidity and inclusion. Financial inclusion is now at 64%. It almost doubled since 2018. In trade and exports, it improves traceability, supports competitiveness and compliance. Gold export, and we'll hear later from mining, is projected to exceed 5.5 billion this year, representing 45% of our exports. New digital sectors are also emerging. Platform-based markets, data-driven services, digitally enabled exports, including KPOs, BPOs, knowledge process outsourcing, electronics assembly, and light manufacturing. Digital systems are increasingly supporting the real economy. Digital systems also change how the state governs. As more economic activity becomes digital and visible, participation increases. Targeting improves and the tax base expands. This leads to stronger fiscal capacity and better policy precision. For example, 34 billion birr in microcredit has been dispersed digitally to 16 million users. That tax revenue reached 449 billion in 9 months. And a new digital service tax was enacted in July 2025. With over 24 trillion birr moving digitally each year, institutions can make decisions using better information. That level of visibility was definitely not possible in a cash-based economy. So it is important to be clear, digital is not a substitute for production. As the previous presentations showed, macroeconomic reform remain essential. Digital does not replace industrial policy. It does not automatically increase productivity, and it does not solve export constraints on its own. Economic growth still depends on production, on exports, investments, and productive capacity. In some economies, we've seen digital adoption expand faster than productive capacity. Ethiopia is avoiding that imbalance. The key question is whether digital systems are connected to productive sectors and real economic activity. That is why our digital strategy is embedded within a broader economic transformation across mining, agriculture, cities, and infrastructure. What does that look in practice? One example, the startup ecosystem. Across fintech, logistics, platform services, digital commerce, BPOs, KPOs, we're seeing new forms of emerging businesses. Digital identity and payment systems are lowering onboarding and transaction costs across the economy, making it easier for firms to start, to scale, and reach customers. Connectivity is also expanding. 4G coverage now exceeds 70%, and Telebur and M-Pesa serve as the payment rails. Fintech innovators and others are growing on top of this expanding digital infrastructure. At the same time, important constraints remain. Access to capital, market depth, and advanced capability still limit scale. Today, the main constraint is capability. In 2025, 8.4% of grade 12 students met the minimum university threshold, up surely from 3.3% in 2022, but still a significant challenge. Without skills and institutional capacity, digital systems cannot deliver full returns. So the challenge is less about access to technology and more about the ability to use it productively. What is our capability response? Our capability response focuses on 4 priorities: improving education quality, strengthening foundational education, including early childhood, aligning skills with economic needs, and building applied and digital capabilities at population scale. The 5 Million Coder Initiative is part of this effort. Today, Ethiopia has reached the 5 million enrollment target. The next ambition is to reach 7 million. At the same time, Ethiopia has significantly expanded foundational education infrastructure, with more than 55,000 schools established nationally, including 35,000 early childhood schools. The next challenge is about quality, learning outcomes, and alignment with the future economy. The objective is to improve real economic outcomes. So once the digital capability begins to scale, the next layer naturally becomes intelligence and automation. AI is not an isolated sector for us. It is the next layer of the same architecture: coders, capabilities, AI. Our objective is not only to use AI tools developed elsewhere, it is also to build the local capability to develop, adapt, and apply AI systems. The AI Institute, established in 2020, the first on the continent, built local technical expertise anchored in real use cases. The Mademar University of Artificial Intelligence, newly established, is designed to become a globally distinctive university, training system builders and bridging research with implementation. The countries that benefit most from AI are not necessarily those with the most compute. They are those that build the local capacity to adapt AI tools to their own agricultural systems, to their own healthcare systems, and to their own governance models. That adaptation capability is what Ethiopia is investing in. So none of these systems scale sustainably without governance. A National Digital Council, led by His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister, was established to align institutions and execution. Digital Ethiopia 2030 sets the national coordination framework. Data governance ensures trust and sovereignty. Standards enable interoperability across systems. The technology is not the hard part. Getting all institutions to share data, adopt common standards, align their individual systems with a national architecture, that is the hard part. And governance is what turns systems into a coherent national framework. So what is different today? What's different today is that Ethiopia is sequencing an architecture, meaning we're not building isolated projects. Identity, payments, data exchange, institutional reforms, and capability are being developed together. Institutions are becoming more interoperable, reforms are beginning to reinforce one another, and capabilities accumulating over time. That is what turns separate systems into a functioning economic architecture. The broader objective is long-term transformation. Infrastructure creates possibility. Institutions create order. Capability creates value. And digital systems connects them all. The future will belong not to the countries with the most technology, but to the countries that integrate technology most effectively into their development journey. That is the path Ethiopia has chosen. I thank you.